WP-Get Web Dev Tutorials for all user levels. Hello people, so this is another global Elementor community inspired tutorial. So Flora here asked about how she can get this type of layout. We've got an image on the left, color on the right, and a button which extends down into underneath the column and continues the color. So I thought I'd make a quick tutorial on one way of doing this. So what we actually want to achieve is, let me just see this, is this kind of thing. Yeah, that's what I've come up with. So just do a refresh on this page. So we've got three sections here. Sorry, three widgets where I've got a image on the left, a color on the right with a button at the bottom. You roll over and it's an actual button. Excuse the motorbike in the background next to my room here. And then the next one here, same thing, but the button, we've got the same color as the background with the rollover changing. And then the third one, same thing, color with the button changing, the different rollover. Now on a mobile, look here. So if we change the width, we get to a point where it drops and we're at our mobile breakpoint here, so between tablet and mobile, and it goes to 100%, and this extends down into the image. So we'd need to add some additional spacing here if we wanted to fix that. I'm not going to go into that today. But I'm going to look at how we get this kind of layout and make these all the same height regardless of what copy is in here. So as you can see here, these are all different amounts of copy, but the heights are all the same, and the buttons are all aligned at the bottom. So if we go to our mobile, for example, what I'm doing here, I've still got some image there, but these all become pretty much the same. Okay, so heading over to our, where are we? The editor. So there it is in the editor. So I've got a bunch of CSS here. I'm actually going to pull all this out. I'm going to start from scratch. And I'm going to update here. Back to the editor. Oops. Just to save time, I'm going to take notes of CSS classes I've created. So on this section, I've got a class called equal height intersection. Just going to note that in my notepad document, which is here. Oh, actually, I just realized I've got some stuff missing there. So let me just say section. So that's my classes that I've got on there. And on the column here, I don't have any classes, but on the intersection in here, I don't have any classes. Column. Don't have any classes. Pretty much what I thought. I'm just double checking. No classes. But I know that on the button, I've got a few classes here. So I'm going to go just copy those and I'll go through those. So button. So these are the classes that I put on there. Okay, I'm going to grab the CSS that I've created. Which I've already taken out. Okay, looks like I'm going to have to recreate what I did. Okay, so we need to work through this. So I'm just going to start from scratch. So I've got an empty page. The first thing I'm going to do is just add a section. And on that section, I'm going to use my same classes that I created here. I'm just going to call that equal height section. We haven't created the CSS for this yet, but we will do that a little bit later. So I'm just going to add the class as a equal height section on there. And I'll put some padding top and bottom so we can get a bit of spacing on it. So maybe 150 at the top, 150 at the bottom. I'm going to grab an intersection and I'm going to put it inside there. Okay, so now we've got a column with an intersection, which will be our content. Okay, so left column, we're just going to call that the image, and the right column, call that the content. Okay, so what we're going to do is in the left image, I'm going to select the column for that intersection and just pick an image for it. So background type, I'll just pick one of these. I don't know, maybe Jimi Hendrix will do. There it is there. We're going to set the positioning to center and the size to cover so it fits in the space. And see how we've got some padding around there. Now with Elementor, if you've got an empty column, it adds padding to it. I'm going to put a spacer in there, which I'll show you what we're going to do with that spacer a little bit later as well. I'm just going to get a default spacer and chuck that spacer in there. And what's happened now is our image now goes all the way to the edge because we've got it's not taking up the padding. Okay, now on the right hand side, I'm just going to get a text editor, chuck that in there, and we're going to set the content background to, I don't know, say my primary color. And I won't worry about coloring of text, everything. I'll just add some style to this text editor and add, say, a 30 pixel padding on it. All right, pretty simple so far. Now, what we need to do is get the button working. So let's just grab a standard button and stick that in there. And I think the word was more on that example. So we're going to say more there. We're not going to bother styling this here just yet because we need to do some custom CSS because of the way this works. So I'm going to grab those classes that I created, which I've now absolutely edited and deleted. So I'm going to grab all these and I'm going to put them on that button. It's not going to make any difference at this stage until we set those up. I'm going to chuck all those on there. So I've got three classes here which I'll put on there, which is round image button, button justify center, and image drop down. The reason I separate these out is because we might want to use each of these individually elsewhere. So we might want a button that's justified in the center, but we don't want it to be round. Or we want a round image that's justified in the center, but we don't want it to be a drop button. When I say drop button, I mean button that comes down here. So let's go back to the editor, and that's pretty much what we've got there. Now, it's going to hit the update button on that. So we're just going to make one of these, and then we're going to duplicate that across. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the button. So I always put my CSS under site settings, custom CSS, so that it can apply to the entire site. I'm going to grab one of I always comment these too. So grab your comment block that you've already got there, and we'll call that custom buttons. Okay, now the first one I'm going to look at is my round image button. So I'm going to create a class for that. And what we want to do is set the width and the height on this. So I'm going to set that to a width. I'm just going to put some dummy values in here for the moment. And what we notice here, on the right hand side here, we notice that the button didn't change. The wrapper around the button changed, because the way Elementor or any page builder works is it doesn't put the... When you put a button on there, you're not just putting a button. What we end up with is an element, an overlay, we've got a container, we've got a button wrapper, and then we've got a button here. So what I want to target is the actual button. So I'm going to grab that class there, the Elementor button link, and I'm going to put that after the round image button. See, now a button is 100 by 100, and we want it to be round, so let's set the border radius to 50%. and now we've got a round button. It's not exactly what we want yet. So there's the first part of our styling. Now, if we look at this now, we need to look at centering that. So we need another class. So we want now the round image button. Oops. Sorry, not the round image button. Let's go back to our notepad. It is the button justify center. Okay, and again, this is put on the widget, so we need to find now where that actually goes to. So I think we want to then go to, let's have a look, the button. I think from memory, what we had to do here is go to our button wrapper, set the display to flex, and use our little pop-up here. We want to set it to a column, and we're aligned to, sorry, align items, not align content. So that's aligned the button to the center. So now we've got on our button wrapper, we've got this class here. So if we go back up here and we go, copy that. And then grab these rules that we just created here. Okay, now we've set that in the center. Okay, now we now need to center the more text. So let's have a look at that. So that would be, that's the button wrapper. And then we've got the ahref, which is the button link. And we want to tell that to be a display of flex as well. Flex. Then use our little helper tool here. And we want to set that to a column. And we also want to align the items on that or justify the content on that to the middle. And that puts the button text, so anything within that, so the span within that goes to the center. Okay, so now we need to grab those rules we just put on there, and we've already got elemental button link class up here, so all we need to do is add those to that. There we go. So this is the first two done, so the round image button and the justify button center. Now the image drop down, what we want to do with that is we want to set that to make the position of that absolute. Again, sorry, we've got to target the button wrapper, so let's go up here. No, we don't, because we can target the whole widget. So we'll set the position to absolute. And we're going to set the bottom to say, I don't know, minus 40 pixels. And there we go. There it is at the bottom. So we've done the CSS to set this up. Okay, now I'm going to just update here. Close my site settings editor. Now with my button here, I'm just going to edit the style on that so that my my not hovered style is my primary color and the hovered style is my secondary. And there we go. All right. So from here, I always find using the navigator easier for doing this when you've got sections and intersections. So I'm going to right click on my intersection here. Actually, let's call that a card. Let's call it a card, and which is actually an intersection. So if we right click on that and duplicate, we've now got a, what have I done? I have missed a point here, missed a step. I've got to get my intersection. Sorry, what am I doing? I've got to duplicate the column. not the card. So duplicate that. And I've got a second column now. Duplicate it again. And what I'm going to do is change some of this text so they're different heights to show you the height problem. Okay, we're going to go to that column for that. Card, the image column, content column. Change the style of that to a different color. So make it the secondary. Get the button. Change the style on that so that the color is the same secondary, and on hover, maybe make it our primary. So we're swapping them around. Then we want to select the next one. So the content for the next one, we'll change the style on that to our accent. The button, we'll change the style on that so that by default it's accent. And then on hover, it goes to primary, say. All right, it doesn't look right in here. It's a really weird thing. So if I just update that and refresh, and view the page, there's our 3 cards. And because we've got different heights of text, they're all a different height. So let's have a look here. Oh, sorry, that was the other thing we were going to do, is on the card, I'm just going to give that a background, the border, just a standard blur, maybe just give it a bit more blur. Okay, and we'll copy that card. Go to the next one, and we're just going to paste the style. Go to the next one, we're going to paste the style on that. So we've got a little bit of shadow. Right, so there they are. That's the 3 cards. You can change these images, obviously, but they're all different heights. So there's our buttons at the bottom. Okay, now the next tricky bit here is the heights of these. Now what we're doing is we're taking a section. Inside that section we've got a column, and then we've got an intersection, and we've got these little spaces in here, which we'll talk about soon as well. Now we want to make sure that all of these go to the full height so that they match each other. We don't like this stepping here. So let's have a look at the CSS and see what's going on. So if we look at one of these shorter ones, go up the DOM a little bit to keep going up the DOM. I'm using my mouse, if you can see down in the inspector here. I'll keep moving up the DOM until I see it go to the full height. So you see at that point there, so on that DOM element it's full height, on this one it's not. So what we're going to do is find out what that is. So this is a section, which is an intersection. So it's an Elementor intersection. All right, so what we want to do is find that. Actually, let's go back to my Notepad document because I did give it a name. So we call it equal height intersection. So I'm going to grab that first. Go back to my classes here and my site settings and custom CSS. I'm going to create a new rule for equal height intersection dot. So equal height intersection. Where is it? Where is it? There it is there. So I've got my class up here. There's the equal height intersection on that section. Then I go down to an Elementor container, a column. So we go to this column, we get a section. So give for my intersection. There we go, there's the intersection there. So from this column, what we're going to do is find a column, and then directly after that, we want to find the widget wrap, and then directly after that, the intersection. The reason we want to target those like that is because if we just target the intersection, if we put an intersection inside one of these, then it's going to mess up the CSS for that. So we need to be more specific with this. So let's go from the top here where we've got the equal height intersection, and then we'll go to an Elementor column. So we're going to go to a column, and then in that column we're going to look for the widget wrap. So we're going to target the widget wrap, and then we're going to target inside the widget wrap the Elementor intersection. Oops. We're going to tighten this up a little bit soon, and we're going to make that the height of 100%. Okay, and we can see straight away our section has gone to 100%, but not the columns within it. Now I want to tighten this up so that if we put intersections inside these, this copy here, we're not going to mess those up. So let's look at how can we target this. So if I go back up here and I go equal height intersection, and then we've got a container. You can get too specific on this, but let's go from there. And what we're going to do is use the arrow, which means it has to be followed by the container. It can't be just anything else underneath. It's got to be the container. And then go further down, Elementor column. See, this might be specific enough, but if it's not specific enough, then keep finding the direct descendants and adding those arrows to make it more specific. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. All right, so now we can see in here, if I just update that, F5. So now we can see we've got our intersection to be the right height, but not the column inside. So let's look at the columns inside that. So we go from here. There we go. So we've got here, so we've got to our intersection, and then we've got a element container, which is a column. If I set that to height, that's fixed the problem. So we're going to then target straight after this intersection. We want the Elementor container. So let's go back here, grab all of that, put a comma there, so it's a new rule or a new selector, and then do an arrow, Elementor container. So it's got to be a dot for class, and now we've extended the intersections and then the container inside the intersection. Okay, so that's pretty much how you do that. Now if I update that, have a look back over here. Now they're all the same height regardless of this content. So that's pretty much what we need to do. It's probably too much content there, so let's take some out of here. For what this user was wanting to do, there's probably more content here that's needed, so let's take that out. Might even put less padding on there if you want to make it look a bit more organized. There we go. So there's our three there with our buttons on them. Now, I mentioned the spacer in here in the images. The reason we look at the spacer is that when we go to our breakpoint where it goes to 100%, that image will collapse to 0 because there's no content inside this column. So if there's no content, it'll completely collapse and the image will disappear. And see, right now we've only got a very short image, and that's because the spacer is only 50 pixels high. So if I say, I make that say, I don't know, 200, let's make it 200. Okay, and we'll copy that, paste the style on that, paste the style on that. Okay, now they're 200 high. So when you go to sort of a mobile sort of a view, you get a 200 high image, then you get the copy, then you get your more button. Okay, now one issue you're going to see here, see these buttons here are not, the content below is overlapping because the next section has a higher natural Z index. So to fix that problem, what we need to do is go to the buttons, and we need to set them to a higher Z index. So let's go back to our custom CSS. And this is pretty much what you do. You work through, you look at the different breakpoints, you find the problems, and you fix them. So it's for the drop button. We want to set maybe the Z index. Let's pick a number, say 99. Okay, now we do a refresh on here. And now our buttons are sitting on top. So that's pretty much what we do. All right, now if you wanted to space those in the mobile breakpoint, you can actually give some extra spacing between those sections, but that's entirely up to you. All right, so that's pretty much how I would go about doing something like this. I think it's easy. I guess one last point would be the reason we don't put an actual image here, we use the image as a background, is because the dimensions of that are going to change depending on how much content you've got, how wide each one is, etc. So what we don't want to end up with odd shapes images, so each image showing here being different ratio to those. So if we set as a background with cover, it'll fit whatever it can within that space, and we've got it set to center. Depending on your images, you might have center bottom, center top, whatever you like. But this works well for these. Now, if I want to change one of those, I just go basically to the column. I go to this column here and change my background photo, and we'll stick, I don't know, Robert Plant there. Go to this one over here, and we'll change that one to Bob Marley. All right, there we go. So I think it's a pretty simple way of doing it. As I'm talking, I'm thinking one other thing I would probably do with my custom CSS is to make it more broadly usable, use variables. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So back here, if I set some variables here, and we'll set them on root, we don't have to, but I'll set them on root. You can just set them on to be scoped on this round image button if you want to, but then you have to prefix everything with that. So I'm going to set it on root. I'm going to go image round button size, and I'm going to make that say 100 pixels. Actually, what have we done here? 150. Let's make that 150 pixels. And then what we'll do is we'll grab that variable and we'll stick that as a var. Okay, and that should be correct. We'll look. Okay, so that's 150 pixels wide. Also got some padding on it as well. So we might set the padding on that to nothing. Let's make it 80 pixels. So make them smaller. We might move the, let's create another variable, drop button. and we'll call this minus 20 pixels. So down here, we can use that as a variable. Okay, so the reason I do it that way is that you've got lots of CSS here, and maybe you might end up with even more CSS to define these things. Having variables, you can change this wherever you like. So let's say we want that to be less. We might make it minus 10 pixels there. Minus 10 pixels. And we've only just got a little excursion along the bottom there. Make it, say, 50 pixels, and it goes right down. Make it 30 pixels, and then make this 100. So by changing your variables, you can change everywhere that it's used in the CSS. So the only caveat is it doesn't support old browsers like old Internet Explorer, etc., etc. If you want to know whether you can use anything, go to caniuse.com, type it in. In this case, it'll be CSS variables, and it'll tell you what browsers will support it. But pretty much all modern browsers will support that. All right, so that's pretty much it. I will chuck this into a proper tutorial with the CSS available for you to download, and I'll link to that in the video. So hopefully that answers the question and is something that's going to be useful for people.